I do have a master's degree in interactive technology. Just a little bit about back history. So exhibit designers are, I imagine someplace there's a program where you can get a degree in exhibit design, but I've never seen it, and I've never met an exhibit designer who had that degree. So as far as I know, it doesn't exist. So all the way exhibit designers come through it is from something else. There was one exhibit designer I met who was a bookmaker first, another one and a calligrapher. And that led to, a knowledge of like stories, but a knowledge of the making and creating of art, and the knowledge of like fine detail work. And he was very good at all of that. I met an exhibit designer who was a architect, and that makes perfect sense. You're like building and shaping spaces, often interior spaces. And you're thinking, about the connection between the science of knowledge and the art of living, and that's very exhibit designery. And then my co-exhibit designer right now at the museum, Deanne Kennedy, is a scenic painter from theater. And that gives you two strengths right there for exhibit design. One, the scenic painter puts her in a visual world where she's telling stories visually. And theater is an experience of pure chaotic madness, where you have like all these forces coming together that are words and text and images and dance and movement, and you throw them together into this space on a very tight deadline, and then a bunch of people come to see it, and then you destroy it all. And that is in essence what an exhibit is as well. In my work, I'll spend sometimes, this project was I think 2 years in the making, at least a solid year of hardcore work. And it lasted for, 4 to 6 months. And then the next exhibit came in, which was my exhibit, and I destroyed this in order to put it in. It's just the way of the work is that there's an impermanence. They talk about, they capture elements. There's a web page, and the text, these pieces that you're gonna see here is the remnants of one of the exhibits. And really, the only reason it exists is because of Dr. Maly, because she was there. She goes, I think this could belong in a museum, in a library, and here we are. But for the most part, an exhibit exists in a very short amount of time, and then is destroyed deliberately, much like a mandala for the Tibetan monks, right? So it's a work of art and knowledge and power and experience that only exists temporarily for a short amount of time, and then ceases, just like all of us. So that's an exhibit. How I became an exhibit designer is I have this master's degree in interactive technology. I worked at a .com when just after the bust. I really wish I'd been for the boom. So many people. My previous generation of master's degrees all became millionaires. Very sad. But anyway, so I did that, and then I ended up working for the military, making video games, which is a very strange endeavor. And then I worked at a university, for-profit college, just with Belly Up, the Art Institute. You may have heard of it. Yeah, I used to do their media in education, interactive design. And then through that, I got a gig at a museum in LA. They needed somebody to design this submarine that was going to be an immersive experience for kids. It was going to be inside a trailer, and they were going to take it around to different schools, and they'd be like inside a submarine in the Channel Islands. This was in LA. And that fit perfectly with all the interactive technology I'd been working with, and the military video games. It all made sense. And from there, I just became more and more involved in museums until I found myself at Bishop Museum as an exhibit designer. I do have a degree in theater, and that ties me into that thing I was talking about earlier, where you're telling stories on a deadline with a group of people collaborating. It's an intensely collaborative process. It starts with two groups of people, the designers, which are myself and a graphic designer, and the curators, who are the storytellers, who are usually PhDs, highly knowledgeable, and have these stories that they've been burning to tell for decades. It's their research, right? And so we work with these curators. I work with this curator, and they have this vision for the story they want to tell, and my job is to help that vision exist in reality. In a space. In a sense, I think of it as sort of a form of theater in that all the people who visit the exhibits are the actors. And so the theater doesn't exist until a visitor walks to it. So when you walk to the table, that'll bring the table to life, and you'll be part of that experience. That's the idea. Our curators, we had 3 curators on this project. Keola Fox, who is a geneticist from San Diego. Jillian Swift, who is an archaeologist, and still is, but doesn't work with the Bishop Museum anymore. And Leah Caldera, who is a library and archivist, who works with the Bishop Museum and helped do some of the rewrites for this table. Because the table was part of a larger experience. It was part of a story that we'll get to in a minute about eugenics in Hawaii and what that meant for the Bishop Museum. And there was all these pictures that are not part of the table and are a whole different story that they took of Native Hawaiians to solve the Polynesian problem, which we'll get to in a minute. Anyway, so Leah is Library and Archives, Keola Fox, Genetics, and Jillian, Archaeology. Those 3 together wanted to tell this story, which is sort of it's a story of science gone wrong. It's a story of racism. It's a story of the complicity of the Bishop Museum in the racist tropes of its time. And it's a warning to future generations that just because this story is so clear, just like slavery is so obviously bad, but we have these cell phones that are made by children, right? So we just sort of scoot that over to the side. So the idea is that even though eugenics in the 20s is a horrible story, there is a form of that goes on today that you have to be aware of and pay attention to, and it's much harder to see because we are all inside of it. We don't want to look at it. So this part of this exhibit, part of this table, is looking back at the past so you can see where we are in the present, so you can see where we should be going into the future. So it's a challenge to you to see what is going on in the world and how can we make it better. So that being the case, both Leah and Keola Fox are both Native Hawaiian, and they wanted to tell this story from a Native Hawaiian perspective, from an indigenous knowledge perspective. And so there's a lot of that tied into it. This table was less about that. This table was also Jillian's project. She wanted to delve into the history of how this all came to be about. And so it started with this. This was the initial concept drawing based on Jillian's story. We called this the torture table. And the idea is that there's an aspect of this cephalometer that looks like a torture device. And there's an aspect of like when you strip away humans to try to find their essential element, there's a sense of torture as you're pulling apart the human. Like when you're trying to figure out what do their hair look like, what do their eyes look like. You have these selections of hair and eyes. It looks like a torture chamber. So that element sort of in these instruments here, which look like things you might be doing strange things to people with. So those elements, we wanted to like double down on them. So the table was going to be built out of wood, so like a butcher block actually, so something that you would normally cut open animals with. Everything was going to be human-oriented and sort of dark. And then there's a companion piece to this table called the future table, which it doesn't exist. It's all removed and it ceases to exist. But that was Keola Fox's table, essentially. And that was telling the story of where are we now with eugenics? What's going on now? A lot of that talked about 23andMe. Anybody do 23andMe? So I don't know if you know, but there's a EULA when you sign 23andMe where they get all of your information. Mm-hmm. They get your genetics. They own your genetics. 23andMe can sell your genetics to whoever they want. One of the people they sell it to is medical organizations who then use that information to make targeted, specific drugs that will help you, but then they can charge you whatever they want. So they've taken your information, and then they're selling you back a product based on your information and just taking as much money as they can along the way. So that's one example of that was at that future table of where we exist now. And then of course, you know, the future Nazis will definitely be using 23andMe to figure out who is a Nazi and who is not. So there's that as well. Something to look forward to, guys, kids. Anyway, so here we are. these are sort of the elements. So there's phrenology, and there's anthropometry, a much more scientific and clear sound. Phrenology sounds like something you might go to a medium. Anthropometry definitely sounds like a college course. Right? So it's much more scientific, it's much more friendly. And the way it worked out was phrenology was sort of mid-1700s. They were like, oh, if you can, by the shape of a person's skull, you can figure out their personality. So if you know that they have a divot right here, chances are they're a criminal. And if they have a bump right here, chances are they're a poet. And they have these skulls. This is one of them. You can see one of them up there. It's a replica. That where all the areas are sort of divided up. And it was pseudoscience from the beginning. It was tied into astrology. And it passed away as soon as like Enlightenment hit. And the scientists were like, you can't prove that there's no scientific proof to that. But the idea of measuring humans was very, very interesting. It's like, can you measure humans and figure out things about them? What do we want to figure out? Well, let's see, what is the ultimate human? How do you find the perfect human? And so that began the study of eugenics, which now has a very dark history to it, but in the 20s was full of light and beauty. And we can move forward from this. Oops, sorry. There, this is what the table turned into, and that's what you're going to see up there. We're going to get into the details of that in a second. But briefly, so you have this anthropometry concept where phrenology is like, oh, that doesn't work at all. But what we can do is we can figure out what is a human through the anthropometry. Anthro is human, pometry is measurement. So through the measurement of humans, what can we find out? What information can we glean? And there was this concept of eugenics where you would combine all the fields of science together, including the new field of genetics, and you would be able to figure out what is the most ultimate, best kind of human there could be, and then you could move the human race all together towards this. The problem with this concept was devised by, for the most part, white men from Europe. And so, of course, just like if you put an eagle in charge of deciding what is the best animal in the world, it's going to be the animal with claws, talons, great eyes, and wings. The best human in the world look a lot like Western white males. And so everything else falls from that. So the thing that was most far from that, you can see it here. You have monkeys, and then apes, and then aboriginals. So aboriginals are like not quite, definitely not top level humans. Maybe they're human, but maybe not. And then from there you go to Africans, and then you slowly work your way up to the ultimate, which are howlies. So that was the concept that they were working with. That was their conceit. That was their hypothesis. And when the evidence did not follow that, they would just shift the evidence. So just like all good scientists, if the evidence doesn't match, change the evidence. Yeah. So anyway, that's where we are with anthropometry and what it meant. So they were trying to measure humans. And that brought us to here. Why were they here? So they were trying to figure out if you could measure race. So I can't imagine why they would want to know by a measurement what a race a person was. Maybe they just, because this is my thought. This is where we're getting away from reality. But my thought is, we all know race is imaginary. It's a social construct that we've applied through, there's language and there's geography and there's culture, and then you tie these things together and you call this group of people Japanese. They live in Japan, they speak Japanese, they grew up Japanese. But if you go to like 3 houses in a country roadside in Japan, one of them might have 3% Neanderthal in them. One of them might have an ancestor who was an Arab trader. You don't know. Those 3 people are going to be so genetically different. On average, there's no genetic difference between those 3 Japanese people and one of them and an African or an Aboriginal or an East New Guinea person. They're all equally diverse within those 3 people. So race isn't actually a physical, scientific, proven construct. Everybody knows it in their heart of hearts. But what is useful is to say this group of people don't get resources so that all the resources can go to this group of people who have all the guns. And that's how we've worked Western society since we blew out of Europe post the plague. And so that's how it works. So you need this construct in order for the system to be logically and morally correct. And so that's the proof of racism. So anthropometry was a way to scientifically prove that indeed there are separate races with different characteristics, and there is a top level and a bottom level. And that was the hypothesis, and that's what they were working on. And the Polynesian problem was that Polynesians, they couldn't figure out where in the ladder Polynesians fit. They seemed a lot like Westerners in terms of their strength, and their ability to do things, and their cleverness, but on the other hand, they were like Stone Age, and they had these darker skins, so they're like, where do they fit in? We'll use anthropometry to put them in the ladder of racism. And that was the purpose, that was the goal of why Sullivan was hired by the Smithsonian and the Bishop Museum to spend 2 years in Hawaii taking photographs and measuring people to figure out what is Hawaiian and how does it fit into the ladder of humans. All right,
Excuse me, what year was that?
It was all in preparation for the 1921 International Eugenics Festival.
Well,
So it was
festival.
1919 to 1921 was essentially. Any other questions before we move on? Is this too heavy? Am I talking too much? No. Fabulous. All right, yeah. All right, so I'm just sort of take you through the elements of the table, because oftentimes you go up to something like that and you like find one thing that's really interesting, and your brain all takes it in, and then it's full. And then you sort of wander around the table, you look at a couple of things, and then you're gone. And maybe you missed out on the full story. So this is an opportunity for you, those of you here, to get sort of like the deep dive into what's going on the table. So that's what we're going to do. So on the table, there is the reproduction of Pierre Marie, I can't say that word. Any French speakers there? Dumoutier? Dumoutier. Cephalometer from 1842. So a cephalometer is it's a really simple device. You'll see it up there, but it just allows you to, like, there's all these gradations here, and then you slide it in and you find exactly to the, I don't know if in the French in the 1840s they were metric, but we'll assume they were, because French are advanced that way. And so, so it tells you to the nearest millimeter the measurement of the skull. And then you turn the face and you get the nose and all these measurements. So somebody would sit in a rotating chair, and then they would rotate around and they'd take all these very, very detailed notes about the measurement of the skull with the cephalometer. Now, we didn't have a cephalometer. As far as I know, there's only one in existence. It's at a museum in France. And I could only find like I think 2 pictures of it, like in all my Google searching. And so we have a genius mount maker named Alan Gu. And I said, Alan, here's a couple of pictures. This is what it does. Can you make it? Oh my God, it's so beautiful. You'll see it. It's right up there. Yeah, it's a work of art. It was one of the first things he did as a mount maker, and it is amazing what he was able to recreate off of a couple of photos and his mind. Anyway, so that's what it is. To take measure, he was a phrenologist. Plaster head casts. We also made a lot of plaster head casts of Kamehameha School students, actually. They were all forced because they were all part of the Bishop Museum family to sit and have their head casts. So basically measurements. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, to claim that American people were naturally tameable and therefore suited to slavery. Just more or less what I was saying. Phrenology, or head reading, was a popular pseudoscience in the 1800s. It's linked to skull shape and specific abilities. Yeah, it had great respect throughout the 1800s. Yeah. Just like to this day, astrology. We all know astrology is I mean, the moon isn't even in Gemini right now when it says it's in Gemini, but still we believe it. All right. Nonetheless, here we are, skull measurements phrenology, and you'll see it up there. You just want to know. You want to be able to say, oh yes, this means I'm very, very intelligent. This means I will have very deep thoughts, and this means I'm an emotional person. It makes you feel good to see it. Okay. So, flawed science. So some of the panels that were originally there are all shifted for this display by Leah Caldera in order to one, sort of separate it from the larger exhibit, but also sort of tie in all the themes together in a unified whole. So she spent several months reworking the text to get it just right. And this is one of those. So in the late 1800s, anthropometry changed the study of race from pseudoscientific into real science. To now, the now discredited theory of eugenics. But really, is it discredited? Yes?
Is that the real, is that like really the real original like hierarchy? Like, are we like 5 up from a possum?
Yes, but 10 up from dolphins.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I've seen dolphins and possums, and I'm not sure that's in the right place.
I don't know. I was actually told recently that the closest thing to a human is this piece of like skin that is a form of coral that just gloms onto rocks. And it's actually genetically the closest thing to humans. So we are most closely related to this like rock, this slimy rock skin that you can find in the ocean today. Holly Bach. That's what she told me. She wouldn't lie. She's a collection manager for vertebrate zoology. All right. Let's see. This way. Yes. All right. Origins of race. So the concept of the curator. So the curators took points of view, and they often do. And there are arguments that you could say, well, race actually, the idea of race started here. It started when, you could say the idea of race started back when humans and Neanderthals were meeting up. And some people would sleep with them, and other people would kill them because they looked funny. So, and the killers obviously won, yeah. Except they didn't, because we're all, often, many of us are a little Neanderthal. But the concept and the conceit of these curators are that racism was a form of colonialism. So racism and colonialism were tied together. That as the Western powers started colonizing the world, they had to make the people who arrived there not the same. It was important for them, not just the Africans that they were enslaving, but also the genocide of the Native Americans and the colonization of Polynesia. All these things were important for the colonizers to believe that they were different. And so that's sort of what this panel is all about. Okay, and then eugenics and genocide, and eugenics in Hawaii. We did do this thing, where you see here, where we, something that part of eugenics is that you have to know, you have to measure people, so you have to know what they are. So they have all these different kinds of hair, which was interesting because they focused a lot on like blonde hair, different kinds of blonde, different kinds of brown. But in the actual original ones that I saw, there was no kinky hair. Kinky hair wasn't even a thing. I think it was like off to the side. But eyes, all different kinds of eyes, and that you would measure so you could figure out what type of eye. And you see these notebooks from these early 1900 researchers where it's like, eyes are E37, hair is 482, based on whatever number systems they were used to define what the people are. Okay, eugenics in Hawaii, first introduced in 1886. And then, oh my gosh, 2 eugenics laws related to selective breeding and forced sterilization were introduced into Hawaiian territorial legislators, but were shot down. Forced sterilization, such an awesome concept. That's a way that you clear out the less desirable races from the gene pool. So you just have forced sterilization. And then also marriage laws keeps less desirable people away from the purer people. But this is the beauty of eugenics as it was described. Eugenics is the self-direction of human evolution, so that they are taking, so evolution was an accepted concept, and now let's take evolution into our own hands and make it better. We're literally doing that this month because they just released the first CRISPR gene therapy. I don't know about you, but people with sickle cell anemia can get a shot that then rewrites their genetic code so they become different and no longer have sickle cell anemia. Just got released, so we now are literally taking evolution into our hands. But back then, the idea was that you would take all these fields, biology, phrenology, psychology, genetics, anthropology, statistics, and combine them together into this beautiful tree of knowledge that would help the human race evolve into something beautiful. But the conceit at the roots was so flawed, it ended up becoming World War II Nazism, is where it led 20 years after that. That's who glommed onto eugenics and used it to forcibly exterminate 6 million people. There it goes there.
The thing that impressed me most with this one is Hawaii would propose a law
To
to support the idea.
yeah, Hawaii,
I
yeah.
mean, it's not the distant past.
No. The people who were in control of Hawaii were, at 1940, were all, descendants, we'll call them. Anyway, this is a thing where you can figure out, I think I am currently, based on this screen, obviously, I'm somewhere between a 14 and a 15 on the scale. Obviously, what is the goal? Yeah, and 36. Don't want to be 36, you want to be a 1. Everybody wants to be number 1. I'm a little lower, below. Maybe if I stayed away from the sun, move my way up. Get some of that skin bleaching cream. So these are some of the elements of eugenics and why it leads to mass murder. And then this is one of the documents that were actually used in the 1921 Eugenics International Festival based on Sullivan's research, where it's using, it's talking about the delineation of races in Hawaii and how those populations change. And I'm not sure where this data set came from, if it was based on like immigration status or birth records, but I'm sure it was very scientifically based. And but I do love the fact that Portuguese, even way back in 21, still were not considered American or British. They had their own little separate category. Along with Koreans, Puerto Ricans, Filipinos, but American and British, obviously, et cetera, et cetera. All right, and then this is sort of where we end the exhibit. There's a piece that talks about what's happening today. When we were building the exhibit, it was during the, I'm almost out of time. Good, I used it all. When we were building the exhibit, it was during the pandemic and also during the George Floyd riots and during the here, I don't know if you guys, Black Lives Matter, the protest here, which all those people came out in spite of the pandemic. And these are photographs that talking about the connection there. And then this is an article that talks about the UN in, I think, the 50s, said that race doesn't exist as a matter of, as far as the UN is concerned. Race doesn't exist, and they used all these scientific treaties to show that race is a construct, it doesn't exist. It's just something that we choose to believe in. But that was not the case in America in the 1950s. Fallacy of racism exposed. What is this? UNESCO in can't read the date here, but it's on the table, so you can look at it. In solidarity with the Black Lives Matter. And the idea, 1950, there you go. In 1950, UNESCO said that racism doesn't exist. America's like, oh no. We disagree on that. Anyway, so the idea that this picture represents is that it is still a thing. People still are just fighting against the idea that we have to be separate, and that these people are those people, and those people are those people, and these people we don't like, but those people are our people, so we like them. And on it goes. And then this is a little bit about Sullivan research and what he did and why he was at the museum. And we have this pamphlet, Eugenics for Young People, which was required reading of Kamehameha school students.
Wow.
So that they would all learn the joys and beauty and power of racism. And then, this talks a little bit about what the researchers called the Polynesian, the mystery of the origins and migrations. And so the way they were going to solve it is to figure out what kind of race they were. All right, that's sort of the pictures. That's about 30 minutes. Any questions? Anybody have any questions for me, for what we did, for what the table is? Yes?
How would you tie in the study of racism on our current exhibit, Bonobo, which is currently in the Long Gallery right now?
Oh yeah, come to the museum. Check out Bonobo.
That was my pitch.
Yeah. Banaba is the story of this island that you've probably never heard of called Banaba. It's part of the Kiribati, which you probably never heard of unless you're familiar with Fiji. Everybody's heard of Fiji because they have that awesome water. But Fiji is next to the Kiribati, and next to the Kiribati was a small island called Banaba, or for some reason the colonists decided to call it Ocean Island. It's an atoll, which means it's very flat. It has, roughly 1 million years of bird droppings on it, which makes it extremely rich in guano. Because of its position, it was very close to shipping lanes for Australia and New Zealand. So these industrialists who wanted to sell fertilizer around the world, starting in the 1800s, but really picking up speed with industrialization in the 20s, went to Banaba and made deals with the people there. I mean, deals the way we made deals with the Indians, but they made deals with them in which they got permission to mine their island to death. So they sucked out all the guano. There's these pictures of these ships and these giant tubes, and they're just shoveling tons of dirt a day into these ships that are then going away, and fertilizing plantations here, gardens in England, all over the world, wherever fertilizer was needed. The Bonamans, there are now, I was told just recently, 300 people left living there. Most of them were forcibly moved to either the Kiribati Islands or Fiji. The water is, you can't drink the water there. It was fouled by the mining, so they have to ship. Those 300 people have to have water brought to them every couple of months. There's no planes to Banaba. The culture has been just decimated. And so the exhibit is by a Banaba, the curator is Bonaban descent. And it's about how do you remix your culture when you don't even have a land to stand on? How do you bring it back to life? How do you take the things that are around you and the things that your ancestors created and allow your culture to live? And that's the nature of the exhibit. And Banaba was destroyed by people who just didn't see the people of Banaba as of any importance in getting in the way of making lots of money selling bird shit to the world. So that's Banaba. Come and check it out. It's a work of art by Catherine Teyala, and I was the exhibit designer for that as well. Okay, any other questions? Thank you, Ken. Yeah.
Was Sullivan related to the Sullivans in Hawaii now?
No, he was just a researcher. He came here for a couple of years and went away. He was mostly funded by the Smithsonian. It was his major grant work. Yes?
Are there any specific points in eugenics history that you think is important that we learn about today? Aside from what we've already been taught.
Right. There's a concept in eugenics. The two concepts in eugenics that I think you have to watch for over and over again is the idea of other, that there's these people and then the other people. These people are my people, those are the other. And the other are not as good. That's the number one thing that eugenics teaches you, that eugenics is based on, and it's a false premise. People are people. You're all good and evil put together. And so that's one thing. And the other thing is eugenics has genetics in it. It's like inside the word, it's inside the concepts, and the future forms of eugenics will come out of the current research in genetics. And so you have to pay attention and watch that like a hawk, because that's where the knowledge is, that's where the power is, and that's where people will be misusing it. So that's the goal. Watch genetics, watch what people are doing, and keep an eye on them. Read those EULAs. Yeah. All right, any other questions? No, that's it. We're at time.
I just wanted, could you just say a little bit more about that coral that is the closest thing?
Read the quote.
Holly has the name of it. It starts with a T. It's like trachea, but that's not quite it.
But what makes it closest to us?
What makes it closest? It's the way it exists. Its skin is basically our skin, and then when you dive down into the genetics of it, it's genetics of it's essentially skin that eats. It eats little. I don't know. I don't want to get into it because I'm probably going to say it wrong. Holly's the scientist, not me. But if you look at the actual genetics of this skin-like coral, its skin and our skin are almost identical. And it's like pigs are very close to us. They have almost identical, like you can do dental surgery on pigs and it's the same as dental surgery on humans. We use pig hearts, right? We can't put a baboon heart in our life. We won't survive, but we can survive if you put a pig heart because we're closer to pigs than baboons. But we love pigs.
But if we could just get a possum heart.
Yeah. So the percentage of genetics, according to Holly, this percentage, like gorillas are like 2% different than us. Trees, it doesn't get very far. I think trees are like 10% different than us. But corals are like a little less different than us than gorillas. Yeah. I'm just saying, yeah. So you don't think of it, but I think if you were going to reconstruct a human, you might want to start with this coral. All right, any other questions? No? Okay.